Mouth of Madness, a Datura trip report by Timmy, posted to erowid.org January 10th, 2004. In high school, I had a friend who had been reading Carlos Castaneda. Carlos wrote about the Yaqui shaman Don Juan Matus, who would access the spirit world by ingesting peyote, datura, etc. So he, inspired by Don Juan, went on one of his expeditions to find herbs, and came back with a Tupperware full of the spiny pods. It would be a huge understatement to say that we were unprepared for the extent of the experience. I ate a heaping tablespoon of fresh, mature seeds. Lucy and Polo had eaten similar amounts as well. 90% of this was told to me by my best friend, Dougie, who witnessed my descent into madness. Basically, what I remember is eating the seeds around midnight with Lucy and Polo. It was kind of like being really drunk, except for the total lack of equilibrium. Serious dryness and soreness of the mouth and throat were present, and some lucid hallucinations. It didn't feel enjoyable, just uncomfortable really. I kept smoking cigarettes that would disappear, and I talked to a friend of mine from day camp who I hadn't seen in maybe 7 years, before he disappeared and I realised he wasn't ever there to begin with. I vaguely remembered finding my upstairs toilet had been puked on, not in, with $1 floating on top. I also vaguely remember cleaning it up, washing the dollar bill off, and hanging it to dry. I really wasn't sure if this had happened, and when I went to check it, the dollar was gone, and the toilet was a little too clean. Later, Lucy said she vaguely remembered puking in my bathroom, but was still not sure if it was real or not. The dollar is still missing. Polo, Lucy, and I all got extremely fatigued and sleepy, so we all went to bed. I had a dream where I kept walking into the wall. I was woken up the next morning by the phone ringing. Lucy and Polo were gone. I picked up the phone. Dougie. Tim, are you alright? Fine, I guess. What's wrong? What is my name? Tell me my name. Oh, fuck you, Dougie, stop fucking with me. I'm not. What do you remember from last night? I'm not listening to this. Just do me a favour and look on top of the fridge. You put my dog's food dish on top of the fridge. Good one, cockhead. No, asshole. You did. Whatever. Goodbye. I'm coming over now. I go upstairs where my mom's house is in total disarray. I find the wall-mounted phone hanging off the hook, the front door standing wide open, the table in the entryway overturned, a broken vase on the floor. And it was Halloween, so we had this dish of candy corn, and someone went through maybe 75 pieces of candy corn and bit off only the orange half. I start freaking out. I had really thought that Dougie was just joking me, but he never took jokes that far. So Dave comes over and helps me clean up. I found all of the pieces of the vase broken where they lay, except for a very large section that was hidden behind the curtain on the other side of the room. Strange. After we'd cleaned things up, Dougie proceeded to tell me what exactly had happened. He'd come back over to my house maybe an hour after I'd gone to bed. Apparently he found me wearing only my boxers, frantically trying to locate something in my kitchen. Things had not been broken yet. He said my name, but I paid no attention, only continued to open and slam drawers and cabinets. Tim, he shouted. I turned around looking at him with annoyance. What? What are you doing? I'm looking for my Windows 95 disk. I said this with an expression and tone of voice of someone who had just been asked what his penis was for. I rolled my eyes and walked off toward my dinner table, stopping for a moment to hock a loogie on the wall. Dougie was very, very confused. Don't fucking leave, I said, looking at the table. I'm not, said Dougie. Not you, the candlesticks. I said this in the same, must I always restate the obvious sort of tone. Tim, what the hell is actually wrong with you? Who are you? I'm your best friend. I tried to remember. John? No. Jake? No. You don't even know anybody named Jake. I'm Dougie. I'm Dougie. What the fuck? Oh yeah, Dougie. I spit another substantial hocker onto the wallpaper. "Tim, this is your house. Have some respect. Stop spitting on the walls." Okay. I spit on the floor. "What the fuck, Tim?" "Hey, at least I didn't spit on the wall." I grab a spoon off the table and seem to be trying to smoke it. I make as if I'm lighting it with an invisible lighter and take a deep breath. I offer David the spoon. "No thanks." He takes the spoon away from me. I walked away and grabbed my dog's food bowl and went downstairs, down to my fridge where I carefully placed the dish on top. "She doesn't need it, and I don't like her anyway," I said, either anticipating his question or maybe just talking to myself. I opened my fridge and began digging into the pockets of my boxers, except they didn't actually have pockets. "I'm so thirsty, I don't think I have any change." I look at Dougie. "You don't need change, this is your house. That's your pop." Okay. Well, do you have 50 cents? "Sure." He reaches in and pulls out a brisk iced tea and opens it for me. I take a single sip, set it down, pull out a fresh can, open it, take a single sip, set it down, and reach for another. Dougie stops me. "You know, you've actually lost your mind, you realise," says Dougie, and I cackle maniacally, spitting on the fridge. I walk toward my bedroom, missing the doorway and walking squarely into the wall. David helps me. Apparently Apollo and Lucy had already left. "Where did Lucy go, Tim?" She went to see the shadow people." Not long after this, I think, Dougie managed to get me into bed and go to sleep, and he went home. It was a school night. I'm not sure if I got back up and did those things upstairs, or if Polo and Lucy came back and did them. I guess I'll never know for certain. Lucy woke up in her bed, legs and feet muddy and scraped, with no recollection of how she got there at all. Polo woke up at home too. These people didn't drive, and they didn't live close to me either. Very, very odd. I'm probably forgetting parts, to be honest. I've heard Dougie tell this story so many times, but I'm pretty sure I did other stuff too. The story gained something of legendary status at my high school. Here's some highlights from some of my other friends' stories. Giuseppe ate some and put on Working Man's Dead, proceeding to talk to Jerry Garcia all night long via his radio. Schloppy, sitting shotgun in a moving car, saw a dark man with a Tommy gun sitting in the back seat. He quickly bailed from the car. Junebug ate some before his family dinner. He was in my friend Odell's basement smoking a bong. When he passed it, the basement and all the other people disappeared, and he was sitting at his dining room table, arm outstretched, while his family stared at him. He had to excuse himself from the table to lock himself in his bedroom. Other drugs you eat and you're like, that's trippy, I guess. On Jimson weed, you're like, hey, that's normal. You never know that you're hallucinating. It's just like a waking dream. This is not recommended, unless you're a shaman. Have you ever noticed just how many Datura trip reports are written by high schoolers? There's an overwhelming amount of them on erowid. Mainly, I think the reason for this is because if you get into drugs in your teenage years, you're not, unless you have a really good paper round job, or you've got some form of, side hustle going on that allows you to afford substances. If you're in high school, I imagine you're not going to have much disposable income. So if you have like this desire for altered states and you can't actually afford psychedelics, and realistically I would say, I've said this many times before, if you're a teenager in high school, I think you really need to respect the fact that your brain is growing. Don't pollute it excessively with substances of any kind. There's absolutely nothing wrong with experimentation of certain substances. I don't think you can safely experiment with Datura as an average teenager at all. And that's why many of these Datura trip reports end with someone saying, this is not recommended whatsoever. And he interestingly put, unless you're a shaman, it takes a lot of consciousness to be a shaman and navigate the Datura experience without some horrendous consequences coming from it. And even then, these shamans are just on another level. They're not like you and me. They're built differently. They have vast experience of mystical states and the substances that can induce them, including the more disturbing ones like Datura and the unpredictable ones like salvia. And this is why when your average Joe messes around with these, he's thrust into a nightmare world where he can't even remember his friend's name or what's real, or if he ever took a drug in the first place. I think that's possibly the most frightening aspect of Datura just on a baseline level. I mean, the most frightening aspect is seeing literal demonic apparitions from your deepest nightmares manifesting in your own literal consciousness right now. That's obviously the most frightening aspect, but I think one of the most subtle frightening aspects is the fact that you don't know you're on a drug. You just take it as reality. Like he says, it's just like a waking dream. That is pretty horrifying. And it's hard for me to understand why anyone would want to do that, but I also understand that so many different types of consciousness exist on this planet, and some people are just driven to do these destructive things. Maybe this guy didn't really know too much about how messed up the Datura experience can be, and like I said, it might be because, say, he's had experience with psychedelics and he can't afford them, he's in high school and he's like, oh right, well, I really desire to experience altered states of mind, which is a sort of a noble cause, but the execution is quite severe when you decide to settle with Datura for your mind-altering expedition. Because all it's going to do is just come around and bite you in the arse, karmic boomerang style. But hopefully this guy learnt from his lesson, and it's quite surprising just towards the end when he said that there's highlights from some of his other friends, like Giuseppe, Schloppy and Junebug. I like the names he used in these, and Odell, because usually sometimes they just put A, B, C, D in trip reports, like person A walked in and then person B flew out the window on salvia. So I like the creativity here. This is actually a very, very popular trip report. It's got 198,999 views on erowid, so I bet many of you who are like erowid enthusiasts have probably heard this one before. But for those of you who haven't, I bet this was quite an interesting one. Yeah, it really is quite sickening just how much of your base reality you can lose when you're on this drug. It really is the stuff of nightmares. Interestingly, a lot of people sometimes are on Datura and that they just take what's happening to them on the shoulder. They're just like, oh well, whatever. They're not really bothered what they're seeing, even if there is some demonic like blood sex orgy happening in the garden, or Superman crucifying himself on the desk. All this like seriously deranged stuff. They sort of just accept it as, oh well, it is what it is. But then after the fact, when they recollect it, I think that's when it really hits them, because then they've come out of the drug-induced experience and they come back to sober reality and they reflect on it and they're like, oh shit, I actually saw that. And it's ingrained in the memory, and it can induce, say, like PTSD. So just don't be messing around with Datura stramonium. Hopefully you all realise that, but I know, having a big audience, that there is always going to be a select few that don't fathom just how bad these experiences can be, and that they'll just thrust themselves into it with sort of like this egoic hubris of, I've done all of this altered state stuff before, whatever, Datura's going to be nothing, I'll be completely sound. And then they pay the price for it. What's the point of the unnecessary suffering? I don't think there is. Like I say, if you're a younger psychonaut, just have some patience and just focus on other areas of your life. Do some experimentation with the safe substances. You should know what they are: psilocybin, LSD, etc. There's nothing wrong with experimentation, but when you start abusing them and you form a habit out of it, this is going to severely warp your brain later on in life. I know it did for me. It's like taking drugs while your brain is forming, and then you get to the point where like your brain fully forms in your 20s, and the habitual use of drugs is now ingrained in your brain, and your brain chemistry is used to having all these external chemicals flowing through its neurons. So yeah, it's something you really need to be careful with, and just focus on your hobbies and focus on other things in life that give you that deep sense of connection with reality and love without having to thrust yourself into the altered state dimensions, because like I've said, it's not a race to take as many psychedelics and experience God consciousness and the universal love. It's not a race, it's a slow, steady walk with some obstacles in the way that you have to navigate via consciousness and wisdom. And sometimes you might fall off the path, but then you've got to dial back in, retune your mind, and you don't just have to do this with psychedelics. You can do it in meditation, journaling, deep contemplation, artistic endeavors, creativity. These are all spiritual pursuits, traveling, etc. Exposing yourself to radical new experiences, do things, shaking up your life in extreme ways. Not extreme like going from living in a house to then living in a mud hut. I mean, that probably would be quite a nice slice of personal development. It'll teach you a lot about survival. But anyway, we're all on a different path, and you've just got to figure it out. We can only help you online, me and other gurus and etc. Not saying I'm a guru, but like other people you look up to and get advice from. We can only help you so much. You can get all the theory down, which is great. Theory is awesome, but you really do just have to tap in and realize how to replicate the theory, not replicate, like transmute the theory into practice, and then that's when the real development begins. So I hope you took something away from this video and enjoyed the Datura trip report. I always enjoy them, and I'll definitely be featuring more soon, because you just can't get enough of them twisted states of consciousness. Anyway, see you later, and hasta la vista.